Hello, I'm Esther Gitu Ewart. It's Wednesday, August 9th. This is Africa 54.
African migrants continue to lose their lives in high seas looking for greener pastures abroad. What is driving them out of the continent? Sudan's Kordofan area witnesses intense clashes as fighting also continues in the capital Khartoum and the Darfur region. We'll have a report from Renk, South Sudan. And a Cameroonian organization utilizes technology to solve local problems and equip young people with digital skills. Ndiho speaks to Nzometiah Nervis, a tech entrepreneur, founder and CEO of Nervtek. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54.
We begin with the tragedy in the central Mediterranean Sea, where we've learned that 41 migrants died in a shipwreck last week, according to the ANSA news agency, citing accounts from survivors who have reached the Italian island of Lampedusa. ANSA says 4 people who survived the shipwreck told rescuers that they were on a boat carrying 45 people, including 3 children. It is unclear if the news given by ANSA is linked to the 2 shipwrecks that the Coast Guard reported on Sunday, saying around 30 people were missing from them. The Coast Guard also says they have recovered 57 survivors and 2 bodies amid media reports that at least one of the sunken boats had departed from Tunisia's Sfax, a hotspot in the migration crisis, last Thursday. The majority of migrants originate from North and West African nations, including Senegal. For more on why many young try to get to Europe despite the great risks, Anthony Labruto spoke via Skype from Dakar, Senegal, with Elion Fall, president of Summer Chance, an association that raises awareness about irregular migration and promotes return and social reintegration.
I think the migration profile reveals that migrants are mostly young people without qualification, job or training, faced with the difficulty of their life on the economic and social level. They all aspire to migrate in America or in Europe to fulfill themselves.
Elion Fall, president of Summer Chance, speaking with VOA's Anthony Labruto. Much attention has been given to fighting in Sudan's capital Khartoum and its troubled Darfur region. However, the Kordofan area on the border with South Sudan is also seeing intense clashes. Henry Wilkins looks at this new front in this report from Renk, South Sudan.
Like thousands of others, Mohamed Hamdan Mohamed has just arrived in South Sudan from El Abid in North Kordofan. He says that since Sudan's war started in mid-April, fighting between the Sudanese military and paramilitary rapid support forces, the RSF, has intensified.
I came here because I fear for my safety, for my life. My friends have been killed there. I have seen it with my own eyes. Both the government and the rapid support forces are fighting. Many people are running away, but others are injured and killed. Many.
Video taken from social media purports to show people taking cover from crossfire in Kordofan. The fighting in Kordofan is partly what triggered the mass displacement seen here. The Sudanese Armed Forces, the SAF, have accused rebels from the Sudan People's Liberation Movement North, or SPLMN, of breaking a ceasefire and attacking their troops throughout June and July. The SPLMN is a group of ethnically Nuba people active in Kordofan since the 1980s. According to experts, the SPLMN has long-standing grievances with the mostly ethnically Arab Sudanese government and is taking advantage of the breakdown of law and order caused by the war in Sudan. The rebel group's stated aim is to secure more political representation for the Nuba people.
There have long been ethnic tensions between Khartoum, center of government, and the people of the Nuba Mountains, who have long been marginalized. We're really at a tipping point where we may see South Kordofan being dragged into the war.
The fighting between the SAF and SPLMN only accounts for one aspect of the fighting in Kordofan, however. Data from the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, a non-profit that remotely monitors global conflict, shows there have been 485 fatalities in Kordofan due to conflict since Sudan's war started in April. In the same period before the conflict, there were just 30, an increase of more than 15 times. The data also reveals that approximately 80% of the fatalities can be linked to clashes between the paramilitary RSF and the SAF, which this video from social media purports to show. Asked what the RSF is trying to achieve in Kordofan, one expert said, "It's not clear."
That's a good question. Political ambitions in Darfur are clear. This is where land has been promised to RSF recruits from other places in West Africa, Niger, Mali. It may be that some of this land has already been promised to RSF fighters, as it's been promised to them in Darfur.
But what is clear is that average citizens are being forced to flee the area in the thousands. In July, the United Nations said around 8,000 people have been displaced internally in Kordofan. There is no data on how many have fled to South Sudan. Jamisco Fela has just arrived in South Sudan from Kordofan.
I witnessed 16 people from South Sudan's Dinka tribe being killed. They were killed in the crossfire by government forces.
Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Renk, South Sudan.
For more reaction on the Sudan war, let's go to the United Nations headquarters in New York, where VOA UN correspondent Margaret Bishia is standing by. Hello, Margaret.
Hi, Esther.
The UN Security Council just met on Sudan. What did the briefers tell the council members?
Well, we heard from Martha Poby, who's the UN's top official on Africa. She called for a negotiated solution as soon as possible on the situation. She said the longer that this conflict drags out, the greater the risk that Sudan could break apart, that there could be foreign interference, and that the country's sovereignty could erode. She also expressed real concern about the situation in Darfur, particularly in West Darfur, where we've seen a lot of fighting. You know, the UN is very, very worried that this could spiral back into what we saw in the early 2000s in Darfur, all the ethnic violence that led to genocide there. So there's a lot of concern. And she urged tribal leaders and civilians and civil society not to take sides as they're being pressured to do, because she said that risks turning this into a civil war. And before we move on, I just want to note that she wasn't supposed to be the briefer today. Actually, it was supposed to be Volker Perthes, who's the head of the UN mission, the political mission in Sudan. And Mr. Perthes is not on great terms with the Sudanese government at the moment. They declared him persona non grata a few months ago at the start of the conflict. He's been operating from the Africa region, not from Port Sudan, where most of the UN is right now. And in fact, we were told today that the Sudanese government threatened to close down the mission if Mr. Perthes briefed the council. So Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield, the U.S. ambassador, said that that was outrageous and that no country should be allowed to bully a briefer, or the United Nations in this case, into silence.
Margaret, thank you for that update. But we also hear of a dire humanitarian situation in Sudan, and I'm wondering whether that was addressed as well. How are they reaching, almost 24 million people right now suffering in that country?
Well, there's been some progress. We heard not a lot. They're trying to target about 18 million of that 24 million people. They've reached close to 3 million since mid-April when the fighting started. But there are bureaucratic delays, security problems. A convoy was only able to get to Khartoum in late June. That was the last time there was a convoy there to replenish supplies. And the first one went to Darfur last week. So it's been very slow. And the government of Sudan, the ambassador, said that they are ready to cooperate with the United Nations, that all the delays shouldn't be seen as obstruction, but just some of it as practicalities. But the UN said we need more visas for our staff and we need more security guarantees to reach the people in need.
Right. Margaret, thank you very much for that update. Margaret Bashir is VOA UN correspondent, reporting live for us there from UN headquarters in New York. A Niger presidential advisor says that ousted President Mohamed Bazoum is running out of food 2 weeks after he was deposed in a military coup and put under house arrest. Bazoum's Niger's democratically elected leader is being held at the presidential palace in Niamey with his wife and son since the coup on July 26th. The advisor says the family is living without electricity and only has rice and canned goods left to eat. The West African regional bloc known as ECOWAS is threatening military intervention in Niger unless Bazoum is reinstated, although a Sunday deadline for the coup leaders to comply passed without action. The United States remains hopeful for reversing Niger's coup, but is realistic. Now, for more on what's happening in Niger, I'm joined live via Skype from Dallas, Texas by Ndiho Rogers, a public policy and African governance analyst and a former lecturer at the University of Cape Town, South Africa. Stephen, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you so much, Esther. Thanks for letting me speak. I appreciate it. Thanks.
What's your reaction first to the inhumane confinement of Bazoum and his family?
Well, first of all, Esther, let me just start by saying that the situation in Niger is very unfortunate. Military coups or coups of any nature in Africa, as we have seen over the past couple of months, has been very unfortunate. It speaks to this democratic backslide, wherein we have seen, military coming back to power in Niger, in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Guinea, which is neighboring to my country, Sierra Leone. But speaking to what you have just said, having said that, I think it's very, very inhumane and is absolutely should be unacceptable that heads of state, in this case, has been arrested. But there's a silver lining here, and I think that's where we have to go back to. The president, who is currently under arrest, I understand, has been also having access to meeting foreign heads of state, including speaking to very high-level military, political leaders here in the United States. So it opens some window in terms of negotiation and how they can actually engage the military government in one hand, but also maintain that the president, who is currently still in the country, by the way, and hasn't been sent out or unfortunately hasn't been killed, as we've seen years back, means there's an opening here for the government to actually negotiate with other stakeholders, both within the African continent, the region of ECOWAS, and as well as international backers here, the US and other international stakeholders. So that's how I would see that, and I think I'm moving forward.
Stephen, we know that the regional bloc, ECOWAS, is going to have a second meeting tomorrow, to try, it's meant to have the Niger's junta, return Bazoum to power. What new strategy can ECOWAS employ this time to heed the warning of the international community and the calls to return Bazoum to the presidential palace?
ECOWAS has been a very success story in Africa, in the sense that we know what they did in Sierra Leone when they removed Johnny Paul Koroma in 1997, and how they were able to help restore democracy back in Liberia after decades of fighting. Now, having said that, and they used ECOMOG, which is the military wing, and now what the buzz in town is ECOMOG is being reconstituted to reverse the trend in Niger. And I see where this is coming from, in part because we don't want this democratic backslide continuing, as it has happened in other parts of the region. But there are options here. I think military intervention in any country in West Africa, and in this case Niger, might be a very difficult thing to see how it's going to end. It could easily remove the government in power, because clearly ECOMOG, if it's backed by Nigeria itself with its huge military power, would be successful. But normally wars are not ended with just removing the president in power. It also means whether there will be stability in the region. Right. And because of all of what we have seen, and not a very general consensus, especially from those who are already being led by military officers, I think there is need for ECOWAS to really think about this very deeply before it commits military in Niger.
Stephen, we're going to have to leave it there for now. Thank you very much for your insight. Ndiho Rogers is a public policy and African governance analyst and a former lecturer at the University of Cape Town, South Africa. Thousands of women are gathering across South Africa Wednesday to celebrate Women's Day. Tuso Kumalo has more from Pretoria.
This year's women's rights celebrations is taking place at a time when there are a lot of concerns about women's rights abuses across the country. Statistics just from last year between April and June show that about 10,000 women reported rape in police stations, and about 900 of them were murdered during those 3 months. And these women came from all across South Africa to listen to President Cyril Ramaphosa here at the Union buildings as to what the government has in store to make sure that they are protected.
Women being abused by everybody in the street, even your own sisters, your brothers, the children. You cannot walk around, you cannot talk to your neighbor, you cannot do anything. Our children are being killed, our society is deteriorating.
Women abuse is a pandemic in our country. Looking at the number of women who are being killed, especially at the hands of their lovers in South Africa. It is a real tragedy.
You call the police, they only come after hours. You report something and they tell you to go and solve it at home first without knowing the root problem. So it's an issue for us. My problem is the protection order and the courts. The law needs to be harsh.
Speaking to the women in his address, the President Cyril Ramaphosa assured them that the government was hard at work, making sure that there is legislation in place that will make sure that men who abuse women get no bail, and those who murder women, they go to prison for good. Tuso Kumalo for VOA News in Pretoria.
Thank you, Tuso. We would like to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, living stateless in America. We'll be right back.
This week on Straight Talk Africa, we zero in on the deteriorating security situation in Haiti. Gang violence and kidnappings are spreading fear and pushing Haitians to seek refuge away from the capital, Port-au-Prince. Kenya is offering to send a police force to contain the violence, but many are concerned about police brutality. Join me, Heidi Adams, and my guests as we take a look at the role Kenya could play in Haiti.
In other news, the Ethiopian National Defense Force has pushed local militiamen out of Gondar and Lalibela in the Amhara region, according to residents. Both are cities where the Fano militia overran the ENF last week in Ethiopia's most serious security crisis since a 2-year civil war in the northern Tigray region ended last November. The United States, more than 200,000 people are living in a stateless status. VOA's immigration reporter Elaine Barrows has more.
Like a year.
Karina Mbartman-Clow is a stateless person living in the United States.
I was born in a country that doesn't exist anymore.
She's one of about 218,000 people in the United States who do not hold citizenship anywhere. Now, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, says it's setting up new procedures to clarify what stateless means for immigration purposes.
They've taken a huge step forward and in terms of recognizing people like us in this country.
Mbartman-Clow was born in Odessa, Ukraine in 1988.
My parents had me as a mixed ethnic child. I'm half Armenian and half Ukrainian, and that was a problem. My dad was targeted for his ethnicity in Odessa, Ukraine. My mom suffered a miscarriage in my dad's city because she was beaten up in the streets.
Her family fled to Canada, then moved to the U.S. in 1996, where their asylum was denied. But by then, the Soviet Union had collapsed in 1991, and Ukraine had become an independent country.
We went to the Ukrainian embassy to get our passports and travel to return, and that's when they said, well, we don't recognize you as one of our own.
Stateless people in the U.S. don't have legal documents or identification to show who they are or where they come from. although some like Karina and Barsman Glau may have an invalid birth certificate.
The only thing at the time, I had to prove who I am was a birth certificate from a country that doesn't exist anymore. My Soviet birth certificate with a copy of it, like a notarized translation, that's all I had.
Others have nothing, and because of it, they have difficulty getting a job or even a place to live.
So they're left in limbo, but physically inside the United States. And it makes no sense for us not to have a solution for this.
The DHS announcement promises to outline examples of information and evidence that can be used by citizenship and immigration officers to help stateless people get documentation, like a U.S. green card.
So you run into a big problem many times with stateless people where they just simply can't prove that they're eligible for a green card because they can't get the documents from their home country.
But stateless people also can't be deported because they don't have a country to return to. And there's no international law requiring people to have citizenship in any particular country. Some countries let you have citizenship if you're born there. Other countries simply don't.
The bottom line is it's very, very easy for people to end up without a country.
It's unclear if the new U.S. policy will allow some stateless people to get government-issue IDs or authorization to work legally in this country. And Bartman Klaus says she hopes the DHS guidance will finally help people in limbo like her. Alini Barrows, VOA News, Washington.
We have a fascinating story about a young Southern Cameroon tech entrepreneur, Nzometiah Nervis, whose organization Nervtek is making a difference in his community. He says VOA's coverage has helped him win awards and connect with a larger audience. Paul Ndiho is here. What can you tell us about this young man, Paul?
That's correct, Esther. Nervtek, a Southern Cameroon organization that utilizes technology to solve local problems and equip young people with digital skills, is bridging the digital divide, providing immersive training programs and workshops, empowering the youth to embrace new possibilities and create a brighter future. For more, I'm joined by Nzometiah Nervis, a tech entrepreneur, founder and CEO of Nervtek. Welcome back to Africa 54.
Thank you so much.
You've been doing a couple of things. What have you been able to do with your tech and innovation stuff when it comes to empowering young people in Cameroon?
A lot has happened already. There has been so much progress. There has been so much growth in terms of empowering young people and giving them the skills that they need to thrive in the digital age. So since the last time, we have had a couple of activities. Mainly, we closed the third edition of the Nervtek Camp. It's an annual program that we organize for kids and teens between the ages of 7 to 17 years old. So we closed that, and we went into a partnership with the German Development Agency, GIZ, to empower over 300 young people with digital skills.
When the young people come to your center, what are they interested in learning?
We teach them coding and robotics and drone technology as well. So most times we start with the coding part, and when we move to robotics and drone technology, notice that most of them like these things and things that are exciting. So most of the time you see they are so excited about robotics and drone technology. The coding part, of course, they need coding to be able to program these robots, but most of the time they love more robotics and drone technology.
Talk about robotics or drone technology. There are a lot of places where people are not allowed to fly those drones. So what are people going to do with those skills if you're teaching them how to fly drones, but they can't fly them in certain places?
In Cameroon, there's a law that governs those aircraft like drones. So in our area, it's not restricted. You just need to have a license, and you just need to, follow the rules that have been given to you by the authorities. So I think that we shouldn't just be limited by where we are. They train these children; they can go to other places that these kids are required. For example, if it's not accepted in Cameroon for now, maybe they travel to somewhere like, let's say, Congo or Nigeria, and it's accepted there. They'll still find it useful. So we are teaching them because wherever they go, they can be able to apply these skills.
As a young person into tech and innovation stuff, where do you see the future of technology in Cameroon. For example, we have ChatGPT taking over, AI. A lot of people are using AI tools to do all sorts of things. You are into robotics, you're into coding. Where do you see this going?
Technology is entering into almost every field. So I think that the future of technology is open. It's actually very open to everybody. Yes, it just depends on how you apply into your context. So I think that those who are not investing in technology today will be replaced by those technologies, by the normal systems. Right now, we can't do without technology. So, I mean, almost everything that we are doing today has to do in one way or other with technology. So I think that the future of technology is very open, and trust me, there's nothing that we really do without technology in the future. And for those who are still doubting about the future of technology, we have to be able to embrace it right now, because the more it advances, the more it's going to replace the physical tasks. For example, there are companies now that are using robots to do things that maybe a human being that still gets to do it. But right now they're using technology in form of robots and other technology like ChatGPT. Before, we needed someone to review papers, and now you just copy a piece of text, you paste it on maybe an AI tool like ChatGPT. It's able to correct the grammar and all that for you. But to use humans, they take a lot of time. So we're looking at efficiency, we're looking at speed, and we're looking at efficient results.
What role do you think media has in advancing what you do?
The media has a very, very vital role. Just like being on the Africa support program, the Voice of America, it has been a big boost to us, as we have gotten more partnerships with high-profile international organizations and national organizations to work with, and I mean, it has given us more credibility, more trust, and more protection for our work to go wider.
I'm glad to hear that, and I'm happy to have been part of the reason why you are getting traction. Congratulations on that. Thank you so much for your time, man.
It's an absolute pleasure to always talk to you.
That's today's Tech Report. Back to you, Esther.
Thank you very much, Paul. Be sure to join Paul Ndiho for his technology report every Wednesday right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.